I haven't made a tier list for the new season since we had some really big changes each patch, but now that I've been playing for a while, I have a pretty good sense of what's meta. Here is my 14.3 support solo queue tier list. Engage and hook champs are currently the strongest class, while enchanters are struggling a lot more compared to the last season. I think the support item changes are a bit unbalanced, and champions that can abuse the best items are at the top. Out of all the Bounty of World upgrades, Solstice Slay and Bloodsong are easily the best. Any champion that can utilize these items well are strong, and that tends to be Engage and hook champs. For Bloodsong especially, melee users get a 10% increased damage as opposed to the 6% for range, but the range is still very OP. Outside of the support upgrades, a lot of the new/reworked support tank items are very strong and cheap as well. To name a few, Trailblazer, Frozen Heart, Knight's Vow, and Zeke's are all amazing items that synergize well with their Engage playstyle. I think overall the removal of mythics and rework of items ended up hurting enchanters and buffing Engage because enchanters don't spike as hard on one item anymore and their item synergies aren't as great. Also, Dreammaker feels very underwhelming compared to the other upgrades. That's a quick summary of my thoughts on the meta. I'm going to cover champions in B and above, starting with Ashe. I think support Ashe is probably the strongest it's ever been because she utilizes Bloodsong and Zezx really well. She's a champion that might not seem the strongest, but when she's played by a smart player, she can create and deny lots of potential plays. Ashe does well against most enchanters, but struggles into the Engage and Mage matchups, which are currently meta, which is why she's at the bottom of B. Alistar uses a lot of the strong support items well and is a good pick into a lot of the meta Engage supports. His strengths lie in his reliable point and click engage and his ability to outtank most melee supports because of his ult. His biggest weakness is his range, and he can get abused pretty hard by a lot of the meta champs, so he's not the best blind. Braum is a champion that can solo win in the right draft, but can also be really useless in the wrong draft. I could have him higher on the list, but I think in a solo queue setting, he's not the best as he really shines when you have access to comms. He counters a good amount of engaged meta supports, but is very useless against a lot of enchanters and supports that can play passive and scale. Renata is very similar to Braum in the sense that she needs the right setup to be good. When she is drafted against a team comp that has a lot of dive and paired with champions that uses a lot of autos, she's an S tier champ, but if those conditions aren't met, she's an okay champ. I think in solo queue, champions like Renata or Lulu whose kits are specialized for auto attackers are bad to climb with because heavily relying on one player is usually a coin flip. Leona is currently a great champ because she uses the meta items well and can stat check most tank supports. I also think the rune shard changes were a big buff for her as the health shards synergize a lot more with Aftershock and her W. Leona has great lockdown, but it's a bit unreliable as her range is relatively short and her abilities that let her go in are all skill shots. She's best as a counter pick because she has some unplayable matchups. I think out of all the enchanters, Sona is one of the best users of their items as she can trigger them frequently because of her W. Once she scales, she can stat check most teams, but I think she has a lot of hard matchups against champions that are currently meta. Also, because grubs were introduced, I think Sona gets punished a lot more for losing prio in lane than she did in the past. Definitely not blind pickable, she does well into most enchanters or lanes where she can go even. Kicking off A, we have Zilean. He is a champion with a lot of utility and CC. He has one of the best ultimates in the game as giving someone a revive can be huge in a team fight. He does have a pretty weak early game, but scales pretty hard and does well into the meta engaged champs. Zilean struggles into enchanters that can outscale him, but since they are on the weaker side this season, I think he is currently a great pick. Poppy support is easily the most underrated pick of the season. All the tank support items are amazing on her. She is one of the best users of Bloodsong, and she counters many of the meta engaged champions with dashes. Poppy does struggle against range supports, but she is a great blind pick because players don't expect her to be support. Like I said earlier, enchanters are on the weaker side this meta, which works out to her favor. Another underrated support is Camille. She's probably the best Bloodsong user, and being able to utilize that item to the fullest is OP. Unlike Poppy, Camille doesn't build tank support items, but instead goes normal bruiser items with Hail of Blades. I typically don't think it's good for supports to build non-support items, but I think Cam is so overtuned that it works out. She is kind of a cheese pick because people don't expect her to go support, which makes her blindable, and she beats most ranged matchups. Camille struggles into champions that can disrupt her dash, but overall she is a very strong champion. Do not sleep on her. Taric can solo carry a team if he's playing into a comp that has a lot of melee champions. If he can get his ult off and auto multiple times in a team fight, you pretty much just win the fight. He is similar to Braum and Renata in the sense that he needs some setup to pop off, but he doesn't need as many win conditions as he is less reliant on needing specific things from his team to do well, which is why I have him in a higher tier. Don't pick him blind because if he's in a matchup where he can't auto anything, he is bad. Rell is just Leona but better. They both have similar ranges for their lockdown, but Rell's abilities are more reliable and their AoE. Rell can guarantee a stun with her flash Q or flash W2 and make it easier for her teammate to follow up with her E. The only thing that makes Leona a bit better is her ability to tank more, but I'd argue Rell's versatility is a lot better to have. This meta is good for her because tank items are OP. She has a hard time against champions that can disrupt her W, but she's able to play around that with smart flashes and hex flashes. Rakan is one of the best engaged supports due to his mobility and reliable CC. While he can't tank as much as a lot of the other melee supports, he can outmaneuver his enemies so that he doesn't get hit. Rakan also has some insane insane sustainability with his Q. You can straight up take terrible trades in lane, and if you just land 2 Qs, you'll be back to even. His kit is flexible enough to deal with most comps, and I feel like you can never go wrong picking Rakan. Senna indirectly got nerfed this patch because they nerfed Yumu's, which is a core item for her, but she's still very strong. She's easily the best ranged Bloodsong user and is one of the few supports that can actually solo carry games. Having your own agency and not having to rely on any of your teammates is huge in solo queue, and there are not a lot of support champions that can do this. Most support champions can make big plays, but need some kind of follow-up to finish it. Senna doesn't need any degree of help and can just do everything herself, which makes her perfect for climbing. Senna has some pretty bad matchups into hook champs, but I think she's so strong that you can still blind pick her every game. Zyra is also similar to Senna in that she can also solo carry as a support. She is hands down the best mage support and recently got adjusted in 14.3, but I think it was a buff for her. The changes to the mage items worked out really well for Zyra, and she's one of the best users of Zezax that she can proc it almost off cooldown because of her plants. She might seem simple, but there's a lot of skill expression in her kit, and she is harder to play due to her lack of mobility. If you can play her at her limit, she has no problem being able to 1v9. Like most champions in the upper half of A, you can blind pick Zyra because she can deal with most comps and she is just super strong overall. Blitzcrank was nerfed in 14.2, but he's still a high tier champ. I think Blitzcrank will always be good because of his ability to stay relevant even if he's behind. He can miss hooks all game, but can land that one game-winning hook to make up for it. Items are great for him this season, but the meta champions aren't. Blitz counters most ranged champions, but you probably don't want to pick him blind because he can get stat checked pretty hard by a lot of the engaged supports. Pyke got some insane buffs this patch and he was already strong, but now he is OP. He is a sink or swim champion and there's no in between. You either 1v9 in games or you run it down. He is easily one of the hardest champions to play and you'll need a lot of hours invested to be decent at him. He has one of the best builds in the game as he utilizes the melee portions of Bloodsong and Umbral Glaive, which are very strong items. A good Pyke player can overcome most of his toughest matchups, so he is blindable. Starting off S, we have Bard, who is a mage, enchanter, bruiser, tank, support, assassin that can out-roam and out-damage anyone in the game. He is currently one of the most broken champions because he can stat check most enemies because he abuses all the OP items and he's just overtuned in general. Bard is able to create the most illegal timings for ganks and roams because his chime speed passive and portals are unmatched. On top of that, he has one of the most broken ults in the game. He is definitely gated by how hard he is to play, but when he's played at a high level, he seems unbeatable. He's probably one of the best blind pick champions at the moment. Next, we have my personal favorite, Janna. I've been one-tricking Janna this season, and as someone who's played her a lot, she is the most broken she's ever been. When Janna got her mini rework in 13.22, where her passive got changed so her damage scales with movement speed, she became OP. Janna can fly around the map at 1,000 miles per hour, still not faster than Bard by the way, and save her teammates while doing lots of damage. I can confidently say you can blind pick Janna every game because she's just that strong. Janna is easy to pick up but hard to master. I have a guide out if you're interested in how to play her. Finally, at the top, we have the most absolutely disgusting handless support that is Maokai. This champion got changed in what was supposed to be a nerf this patch, but he's still sitting at a 54.5% win rate. His strengths lie in his ability to zone enemies with E and to force engages with his W and R. Like all champions in S, you can blind pick him because he is just so strong. Maokai is the easiest and most broken champion to play right now, so if you want free LP, just spam him. That concludes my list. Let me know what you guys think.